There was a huge battle at the bottom of the table as Leicester City played Everton. It was a big 6-pointer, and Leicester got one. Let's talk about how the Leicester versus Everton post-match analysis got on and what we can do to improve. Welcome to the Fox 8 TV. Hi everyone, and welcome to another one of my analysis shows. As I'm recording this, it's actually 10 minutes to midnight on Saturday on the day of the game, but I was bored and I really wanted to go through this match. But apologies if I sound a little bit sleepy. I will try my best. As always, I'm also going to put a link to Fox's talk down below. That's going to give you a bit more context, give you a bit more animated GIFs and clips, although this time around, it's going to come out a little bit later on Fox's talk than normal, just because it's a bit later now and it takes a bit of time to get all the footage up. But I will do that and will continue to do that. But with any further ado, let's get on with the analysis. So it's finished 1-1. I think this is a result that maybe doesn't suit either team, if I'm being honest. But that's how it is. And I suppose it's better than taking a loss. Looking at some of the underlying data, is there cause for concern? I think there is. If we look at the expected goals, Everton actually had more, which indicates that even though they had less of the ball, just 42%, they actually had higher quality chances. Calvert-Lewin had a one-on-one, which Hermansen made a really good save later on in the second half, and that was really high value effort. For Leicester, we huffed and we puffed, but how many real clear-cut chances did we make? Not so many, although we did score, and that means we have scored in every single game so far. However, it's another game where we don't have a clean sheet, meaning that we've also conceded. So that is a big shame. Some nice things to take away, though. We had quite a lot of tackles. We've generally out-tackled the opposition in every game. I think something that we are good at, even if some of the fan base don't like to admit it, is I think we are good at 50-50s and we do give a good account for ourselves. I don't think in any single game we can be accused of not putting in effort. But you would say that's the minimum at the elite level. But last time we got relegated, I don't think we did put enough effort in. So at least that is something encouraging that we can take going forwards. Looking at SofaScore and using that to get stats from the game, I want to say again that this shouldn't be taken as gospel, because I'm going to show in a minute that some of these ratings I would quite strongly disagree with, but I do think it overall gives you a context of the game and it shows you some important things. So actually the first thing I want to do is just draw your attention here to Everton's average age of 28.8 years. This was quite an aging Everton team. And for me, this is one of the reasons why the result is very disappointing, because I think this team was not the best that they could put out. They had a lot of injuries, and look, they were playing Ashley Young at left back and James Garner, who's normally a central midfielder, at right back. And whilst, for example, Garner didn't have a great game, we didn't really expose him as much as we could have done, even though our man of the match was Steffi Mavididi, and we'll come on to him in a moment, who was great. Indeed, he had a strong game. We're going to come over to what the starting lineups were and so forth. Overall, we didn't play too badly according to these stats, and that's maybe something that I would disagree with. But it kind of gives you an indication of the game that best player for us was Steffi Mavididi, probably followed by Wilfred Ndidi. And for Everton, Ilman and Di and Dwight McNeil had strong games. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the substitutes, or the lack of them, that came on and the impact they had. So Buonanotte came on to this game. He came on for Bilal El Khanous, which is something we'll discuss. Now, interestingly, he didn't have a good rating according to this, but that's something I quite strongly disagree with. I think actually his introduction was the reason we got back into the game. However, what I will call out is that both teams didn't really make many subs. To be fair to Everton, they had so many injuries, they couldn't even fill their bench, which again shows you that it's an opportunity that we didn't take the most of. They actually had two goalkeepers there, you can see on the bench. And for us, something that I think was super frustrating is that we put Fatawu on in the 90th minute, and of all players, the one that we took off was Steffi Mavididi, who was clearly our best player. That is an outrageously bad substitution on a number of levels. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's scandalous. I cannot believe you would do that. Again, look at how old Ashley Young is, and we had Fatawu to run it. Well, we never tried Fatawu against him. I'm just shaking my head at the camera here. I think that's so poor from Cooper. More on that later. Here I've got the match momentum. This is something that I've been adding recently. I think it does show good indication of the game. So here we've got Leicester on top, Everton on bottom. And the sort of bigger the spike, it shows you the more momentum the opposition would have and where the goals would come. And what you can see here is that Everton started off pretty strongly. This is just cut off, but they scored after having that strong momentum. Leicester then got back into it. Maybe it was a bit even as the half got on. There was some torrential downpour, which will come to it. What I will say is in the second half, though, again, we kind of started poorly, but around here is when Buonanotte came on. And after that, we actually, from that point on, we pretty much dominated the game. We got our goal back when we had the most momentum. We didn't quite match that, but we did have momentum from then all the way till the end of the game. And I think that we could have maybe have got a winner, but again, I just don't think the manager really went for it. I wouldn't say he was defensive, but I do think he was a bit too pragmatic. Were Everton hanging on? Maybe that's unfair to say. I think the expected goals suggest that 1-1 was a fair result, but definitely feels like an opportunity wasted. And you have to ask, why did we not start in this particular manner? Although there might be some extenuating circumstances as to why that was the case. Right, talking about the lineups, you've kind of already seen it before, but it's an interesting thing to talk about. So there's just one change from Leicester. Thank you to Locks at Blue Tinted Glasses providing the graphics here. A great channel. We work together on match days and we do a little bit of analysis as the game goes on, which is lots of fun. The big change was that Bilal Al-Khanous came into the team, and he actually came into the team in place of Oliver Skipp. And what that meant is Ndidi dropped back to form part of the double pivot along with Harry Winks. And Bilal Al-Khanous came in as the number 10 position, and he's a central attacking midfielder, young player of the year from Belgium's Pro League, and it was very exciting to see what he could do. Unfortunately, maybe didn't have the best game. Other than that, though, Jordan Ayew kept his position on the right-hand side, and that, for me, was a big surprise. I think Ayew's actually been good in all of the games that he's played, but if ever there was a game that wasn't for him, this was it, in my opinion, because we knew that Everton had injury problems going into the game. We knew they could be got at, and we know that in general, Everton don't have that much possession. So that means you want either creative players or players that can run at fullbacks and cause them issues. So either Facundo Buonanotte or Abdul Fattah would have been the right selection for this game. The next match we're playing is Arsenal. Against Arsenal, playing Jordan Ayew, I think makes a ton of sense because we're not going to see much of the ball. Having someone that can work hard, win the ball and get about, that would be perfect for that. Or if you're 2-1 up and you want to see out the game, perfect player to come on. I'm a bit puzzled as to why Ayew keeps starting all of the games. And in this one, it was Mavididi that was taken off and not Ayew. Again, Ayew wasn't bad, but he just was nowhere near as good as Mavididi. He's good at the defensive side, but he doesn't carry as much of an attacking threat. Whereas Fattah and Mavididi, they will lose the ball, but they will also make things happen. And when we score, it's not a surprise that it often comes from one of those two's work in the game. Ndidi had a really good game last week. So keeping his place, I don't think was a surprise, but him being moved back to be part of the double pivot perhaps was, although he was pushing up quite a lot in this game, which we will show in the future. Talking about Everton's lineup, I put Villa here by mistake, my bad. But talking about the Everton lineup, so Everton were pretty injury ravaged and they had to make a lot of changes. Although actually, I think these changes benefited them quite a lot, and I think they may well keep a lot of these players going forward. Jesper Lindstrom came into the team at right wing instead of Jack Harrison starting. Idrissa Gueye, who I was expecting to start, had a bereavement in his family, so he couldn't play. So that meant that Doucouré came back in, and also Oriol Mangala, who last season was at Forest and didn't do particularly well, but now he was in the team and playing for Everton. They kept Tarkowski and Keane, the Burnley classic duo, in central defence. And as mentioned before, Ashley Young stayed in the team, but at left back, and James Garner, who's usually a central midfielder, was playing at right back. So they really were a bit makeshift, but I think they still had a half decent sort of front four players. But just to call this out again, look at the amount of players that were missing for both teams. So we've worked without Patson Daka, and he may well have played a part in the game if he was available. But other than that, Stolarczyk is a really good keeper, but he's not the starter, right? Mads Manson is always going to be the starter for Leicester. Looking at Everton, Brozier they signed, who was injured to be known about, but Gueye was out, Coleman, Branthwaite, Patterson, and some of their other players were doubtful, i.e. carrying a knock. Mikolenko didn't even play today. Harrison only came on in the second half. So given how many injuries they had, this was a golden opportunity blown to get 3 points, especially given how important this game is likely to be come the end of the season. Right, let's look into the first half. And a graphic that I've been using over and over again is, the three central defensive midfielders. But hang on a minute. In this game, we didn't have three central midfielders. We only had two. So that's a good start. So Skipp was the unlucky one to make way. And in his place was Bilal El-Khanous, Moroccan central attacking midfielder who was signed from Genk near the end of the transfer window. So I really want to take a look at him. I will speak more about the game in a moment, but given that he was the, not surprise inclusion, but like the saucy one, let's see how he kind of performed. And unfortunately, he really struggled. Now, what I want to say here straight from the off is I'm not going to get on this player's back. For a player coming from abroad to adapt to the Premier League is always going to be a challenge. Some have managed to hit the ground running, but more often than not, you need a bit of time to get going, especially playing for a new team with new players in a new system at a higher level, not your first language, etc., etc. There are many things to learn, and in the past, there's been many players who initially had bad seasons and ended up becoming top class. And I'll give you some examples. Mo Salah, Kevin De Bruyne, they went to Chelsea at early age. It didn't work out, and they've ended up being two of the best players in Premier League history. So do not write a player off early. And I would also say that we're going to be playing Walsall in the League Cup midweek, and Bilal should 100% start that game to build fluency, in my opinion. And there's even an argument that he maybe even should start against Arsenal, because we'll probably lose that game. So therefore, if we don't really care about the result, maybe just to get him a bit more up to speed could be something to think about. Maybe some other people say don't be defeatist. We might have a chance against Arsenal, which we might, and so go for a point, and then maybe don't play him in that game. But let's talk about how he played. So first thing I want to pick up here is the positions that he took. And I think this is the positions that he took up when he played for Genk, or that's what I'm guessing. And I think this had a bit of a negative impact on his performance today for Leicester. So where he's supposed to be playing is as the number 10 and pressing up top with Vardy and being the central creative outlet, playing centrally, receiving the ball and making things happen. Now, he's got a good range of passing on him, Bilal, and he's also quite good technically on his feet. So I can see he's one of those players that likes to drift around and drift deep to pick up the ball and make things happen. James Maddison was kind of similar to that too. But the problem is that because he was drifting deep and to the left, what it meant is he wasn't in the right position when we got the ball into that area of the pitch, which means he couldn't make things happen. And he was also getting in the way of other players. And every time he got on the ball, I think he was a bit nervous and he gave it away quite often. And then once the torrential downpour started, which we'll come to in a moment, I think he was probably thinking, maybe I shouldn't have come to England. But I'm sure he'll get over it. I think it was just one of those days for him. So this is where he's supposed to be. So I've actually ringed two players here, Mavadidi and Bilal Kanous. You can actually also see Jordan Ayew here as well. So this is actually where we want him to stand. So this is in the number 10 position. He's in the middle of the three. That means Mavadidi can be on the other side. And basically between him and Ayew is actually drifted inside to become the 10. He starts out on the right-hand side. And you can see Justin's kind of pushed up. And that's the Steve Cooper system, that one of the fullbacks pushes up to support the attack when we go on the attack, which is what we'll come to. So that's where we want to see him. But he wasn't doing this enough for me. Here's another example. This might look like the first slide I showed you, but it's not. Again, here he is drifting deep into the left, and he's really far out left here, and I don't like this. Here you can see Ayew has come centrally, which is fine. But if this was under, let's say, Enzo, what we would see is we'd see a box 4 formation, which means that Kanous, instead of being here, he should probably be where the referee is. Actually, the referee's probably in a perfect position for him. But instead, he's drifted all the way out. Now, look, it's fine. In football, you know, you should move around to make space. But again, I would rather see him probably in this position here. He was finding this area too often, and it meant that, again, we couldn't really find him where we wanted to, and he couldn't impact the game as much as I would like him to. Because what I was really hoping is to see that he would get the ball a lot in this game, maybe being the player that received the ball the most of our attacking players and being the one that made the most key passes. And that's not really how it panned out. Here's another example. Look at where he is. He's hugging the left-hand touchline. Why is he so far over? I'm not sure. This should be Mavadidi. Mavadidi's probably a bit further up. He should be more in this middle area. So again, I think he's got too much of a tendency to drift out. Now, one thing that was said in the comments when watching the game is this a tactical instruction from Cooper? Which is possible, because Buonanotte himself also tends to drift around. But if that is the case, I don't think that's something that works in the system, and I don't think it's the way that we'll get the best out of a player like this. I also mentioned it was getting away of some players, and I've got some examples of this too. So here you can see we've got El Kanous here 11, we've got Mavadidi, and they're all pretty much playing in the straight line. And the issue is now Mavadidi, if he wants to turn and run, you've got a player in front of him. Again, here, Kanous should be more here in the 10 position. So we've got a passing triangle going on. Where he's standing here, I mean, he's not going to affect the game in any way other than maybe taking a defender out of the game. But this is a structural issue, is what I'm saying from a coaching perspective. And unfortunately, what this meant for me is that in large parts of the game, it felt like we were playing with 10 rather than 11, simply because he was standing in the wrong place. And that is a big problem, because you cannot afford to do that at the elite level. Another example, look at his position here compared to Mavididi. Now, to be fair, this is a little bit of like a moment on transition stroke on the break, but they're way too close to one another. And again, they're standing in each other's way. Now, to be fair, this maybe is a problem with the Cooper system, because what we would be doing last season is the wingers would be hugging the touchlines. They would be the one that would literally have paint on their boots, as you would say, the whole game. And the number 8 or the box crashers would be occupying these positions. But under the Cooper system, the wingers are instructed to move inside. And Tim Avadidi has moved inside. But then what does that mean with Bilal? So he's probably been told to move outside, but it's all a bit of a mess and they're standing in each other's spaces. And that happened a lot. And basically what happened is when Bonanosse came on, he wasn't making those mistakes and the spaces were there. And that meant we could all of a sudden find our passes and it meant we made things happen. So look, this is something that you can learn. You know, you had no preseason with the teams. You haven't been able to learn the system. You haven't had to the coaches be able to like blow the whistle, stop the game and say, hey, Bilal, don't take this personally. Just you're standing in the wrong place. You need to stand here. You need to stand here and get the connections going. But it wasn't the case here. And so that's why I'm really think he has to start against Walsall, because against that game, he should get the ball a lot and he should be able to then just focus maybe on these things and getting them right and drilling it time and time again. Here's an example of him not really being involved enough. So here we are on the attack. The ball's actually around Mavididi here. You can see how far Ayu's come along. You can see James Justin is pushed up. And actually, in this case, Victor Christensen's pushed up. But this is wrong. Christensen should be standing where Bilal El Khanous is standing, and Khanous should be standing here, and perhaps even him and Mavididi should be flipped over. Now, as it happened, the ball actually did end up finding its way back to Bilal, but he was too far back and it ended up not really doing what he could do. So again, I want to see him get more involved. And like I say, is this a tendency that he was more of the deep-lying string puller at Genk? And look, that could be the case, but I think we need to push him forward, because in this case, he's almost playing like a skip. And so what you've ended up going is that you've got him, Winks, and Ndidi all standing here. Winks even got his hands on his hips, and they're just not getting involved in the game. One of these players, if not two, needs to push up to make more of a threat, to give us more of a chance. Otherwise, look at how many Leicester players there are compared to Everton. This is going to be tough going to break them down and score a goal. So overall for Bilal, 56 minutes played, 42 touches, 82% passing accuracy. He did have 2 key passes, 1 accurate long ball, only 2 out of 4 ground duels won, only made 1 tackle. He was fouled once. And this comes from LCFC data. It's a great site. Follow them, gives you a lot of good data for the players, and I use it a lot in my analysis. And they say struggled to have an impact in his first start. And I think it's putting it mildly. And look, I think starting with him is not a mistake. I think you had to start a creative player. I think either him or Buonanotte needed to start as one of the 10s. I think there's an argument that they both should have started, if I'm being honest. But starting one of them makes sense. Now, Buonanotte probably would have been the safer option because he's got a lot of Premier League experience. But given that Buonanotte is only here on loan, whereas Bilal Khanous we've signed him on a 4-year contract, you want to get him up to speed as soon as possible. So I can understand why going for him was selected, especially given that Everton were bottom of the table. It didn't work out, and that's fine. But I do think a mistake is that we persevered with him for too long. I understand from the man management side that sometimes you don't want to ruin a player's confidence by taking them off too early, right? But at the same time, sometimes you just got to put your arm around their shoulder, say it's fine, it's not your fault, we're going to try again, but we've got to do X, Y, and Z to move forward. So I think there could be a bit of improvement there from the man management side, from the manager too. Right, now I want to talk about a bit of an issue. I don't think we've made as many as the last time we went down in the Premier League, but we are making unforced errors. So here's some examples, and ultimately this led actually to us conceding a goal. So here we've got Okoli, and he's got the ball. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about how the midfielders were used. There's a few sections coming up on this. So Winks is now in our system the player that will always be the deepest back. But what we do is that rather than having the other defensive midfielder standing square to them, so last season this would be Ricardo and he'd be standing here so that both of them could play bounce passes to one another. Of the 2 central defensive midfielders, actually one of them pushes up a little bit. So it's either Skip or in today's case it was Ndidi. So Okoli's got the ball and he's trying to play a pass. And he actually tries to play a pass to Ndidi, which I think is the wrong pass to play. I think he needs to play it to Winks and then get the bounce pass back and play it across. But he tries to play it to Ndidi. What he actually ends up doing is he plays the pass really hard and it actually hits Winks accidentally. It ricochets off him. And now Everton are on the attack and they have goal scoring opportunity of this. And this is just frustrating because, again, it's 6 minutes into the game. You don't want to do that. You're giving the other team an opportunity. We did mention that even though Everton don't tend to have that much ball, they are good on transition and they carry a threat. And of course, they scored in this game, which proved it to be the case. I actually think overall, Okoli actually had a good game. It's just unfortunate that this particular error happened early on. Again, talking in about how the midfielders have used, I've kind of spoken a little bit about how Ndidi and Winks were playing together. But I also want to talk about Justin, because a big feature of our game in the last 2 games for sure is definitely noticeable compared to the previous game, is that Justin now is the one that we seem to be attacking with a lot more often. I wonder why that is. It might be because we've looked at who the wingers are for the opposition and we think that, okay, maybe against players like Son, it's better to be defensive. But now in the last couple of games that we played, we can be a bit more aggressive. So what we've got here is 4 of these players and how they're utilized. So what we see is that Ayew, he normally starts on the right-hand side, but he's drifted inside to be more of a 10. In his place, JJ, you can only see the top of his head here, but he is now making the auxiliary right winger on the right-hand side. Then, of the 2 CDMs, as I say, they don't play square to one another. Winks is the one that drops back, and he is the builder, and he is still good on the ball, and he's passing to Ndidi. And I actually have to say, we have to give Ndidi a lot of credit, because in the past, we've said that he's not that good at playing through traffic, and he was caught out a few times in earlier games, such as against Fulham. But since that game, he has been very good at actually receiving a ball, turning and keeping the ball going. And in my opinion, I actually think he's been our overall best player so far this season, which is impressive given he's basically played 2 separate positions. As for Harry Winks, he had a bit of a mixed game for me. I don't think he was bad. I don't actually think he's been too bad in any of the games that we played. But equally, he doesn't quite seem on it for me. He isn't as good as he was last season, where he started off in imperious fashion. For that first 20 games, I think he could even have been the best player in the Championship. He looked like a Rolls Royce. And it wasn't like he wasn't being pressed. Teams were trying to press him. What's up with him? I do think that not having Ricardo square to him impacts his game a bit. I think that's how you get the best out of Leicester, and I think we're still used to playing that way. I also think that just having this sort of system of Cooper is inherently a bit more risky, because if you get 2v1 in this position, you lose the ball, you're in big trouble. But I suppose the benefit is that if you can play out, you find extra room because of the CDM that's pushed further up. So something to think about. But this in general is the shape that we're using. And the difference between this game and the last game is, instead of this being Ayew, this probably would have been Ndidi himself. And this would have been Skip, and Winks would have been the furthest one back. So here's some examples of us using Justin, and it's part of the same sequence. So we get the ball to Fass, and Fass was playing some good long balls to try and find players on either wing. And I have to say, this is something that Fass was really good at last season, actually. If you remember, he would quite often be the one that would play the crossfield ball. So he would normally be the right-sided centre-back, and he'd try and ping out and find Mavididi. But on occasion, he'd even be the left-sided centre-back, and he'd ping out the pass to find Fatawu. He's actually got a good long-range passing, and it's something that he was quite effective at in this game. So here he's gone to pick out JJ, and he actually does find JJ, and JJ puts in a dangerous ball across, and although it doesn't go in, it is a threatening occasion that we've created. And I think this is still one of the strengths of our game, and maybe something we should use a bit more often. The only thing I would say is that rather than this being Justin, well, one, it could be Ricardo, but honestly, the real answer is this should probably be Fatawu, if you ask me, because that's how he worked last season. We had 2 extremely dangerous wingers, and it caused teams a lot of problems. Right, I always say that it's a game of transitions, and it is, and that's why we ended up conceding a goal. So we actually were on the attack, we lost the ball, and then the ball breaks here to Ilman and Di. And at this point in time, this is not actually how he scores, but this is like an opportunity for the threat. So we try and shoulder him out. It's like a half decent press with Ndidi and Winks trying to 2-on-1 him and try and see the ball out of play. But he skillfully manages to maneuver his way out of both, and he was very impressive at doing this the whole game, and he gets the ball. And all of a sudden, this creates a big issue. And the issue is that like now it basically takes players out of the game. That's the thing with the transition. And what you can see is that on the opposite side now, we have a man that's out of position. Now, because the way that Justin attacks, Justin you can see is up here. And at this point in time, he's not goal side. So here he is running back to get fair play to him. He has got goal side. But what it means is that other players have to come across. So Fass has been attracted, and Fass is now out of the game because of this piece of skill that Ilman NDI has played. So Okoli's had to go across. Christensen still is covering his man. But this means that Jesper Lindstrom on the other side is completely and utterly free. And that's alarm bells. And so what that means is that NDI puts in the cross, Lindstrom comes running in and he takes a shot, and luckily this goes wide. But that to be honest with you, he's got a minimum put it on target, and he could and probably should have scored. I think if this is against Man City, Arsenal's 1-0, you know it is, right? So that's a big no-no. And I think what's even more frustrating is that it's not just him that's free, but they've even got the Kure here who's made up as well. This would have been a harder pass to make, but they still could have made it. So they've actually got 2 free people here. And that's all come off the transition. And so that's something that you've got to be very careful of when you lose the ball. And I think it might be something that we have to think about when looking back at our defensive structure. Because one reason you could say why having Christensen in the team means that we've got another man back to be able to cover ourselves when we lose the ball after an attacking transition. But the issue for me is that I feel that that's not really the case. And we actually look as vulnerable as we did from last season when we would only have sort of a 3 and a 2 and have an additional man forward, but without the attack. So I actually feel we've gone backwards. I feel we are neither as good offensively, neither as good defensively, despite trying to make a change that on paper should make us a bit stronger defensively, but maybe a bit weaker offensively. Speaking of NDI, he was the one to watch. I actually said it was Dwight McNeil earlier in the game, in the pre-match preview. And Dwight McNeil actually had a good game. He was drifting around and causing a lot of havoc, but he was really impressive, Ilman NDI. I've never really seen him too much because he was playing for Sheffield United in their promotion season. Last season, he was playing in France for Marseille, and he's just come back to the Premier League this year. But he looks like a really good signing for Everton, and I think he's quickly becoming one of their best players. Here you can see he receives the ball on the left wing. He's inside left forward, cutting onto his right or left-hand side. And he manages to play a 1-2, beats Justin, gets in front of him. He actually, but to be honest, if you had Justin on toast the entire game, I don't think Justin did too well there. And I personally don't think Justin's start to the season has been too impressive. And we've got Ricky P on the bench. I think Ricky P should be playing. If Ricky P was doing this badly, we would say get him out and move Justin in. You know, I just think it's madness that Ricardo hasn't had a single minute of Premier League football yet. So comes into NDI, he cuts in, and this is really good skill because he's surrounded by 3 men, but he manages to find room on his right foot, hits a shot, hits it right into the corner. Some people feel that Mads could do a bit better. Doesn't matter, pings off and it goes in, and it's 1-0 to Everton. And at this point in time, you can look at the stats. They'd already had 4 attempts, 2 shots on target, and they deserve to be in front. And that's just a fact. Fair play to Dyche. I was not expecting this. I thought they might be quite cagey, especially given their injuries. But they came to play. They took their advantages and they were 1-up. And they deserved it. So moving on. What was the reason for this? And I feel that some of this was due to poor tactical instructions. Now, to be fair, this could also be that we have given instructions and the players haven't absorbed it. But when I compare this to last season, I feel that players always knew where to stand, and it was really clear even in pre-season under Enzo. And in fact, today, earlier on, Chelsea played West Ham. They won 3-0 very impressively. And yeah, Chelsea have got better players, but they didn't really have much of a pre-season. And yet I saw the same moves and same patterns of play that we saw at Leicester for them, and they look really, really good. And that's Maresca. I think he's a top quality manager. We always knew that Cooper wasn't going to be as good, but I'm disappointed that it hasn't kind of got better faster, in my opinion. So there's a lot of things to pick out here. So I'm talking about players, in my opinion, not being clear in what positions to stand, or if they're being told to stand in these positions. I think this is a big no-no. So firstly, inside this box, we've got 4 Leicester players, but the positioning of these players I feel is entirely wrong. So firstly, we've got Okoli here on the ball. Now, what's he doing here? Because he is supposed to be back in the centre half and he should be playing alongside Fass, but instead you've got Fass and Christensen up here. So, okay, he managed to win the ball and pick it up here, but this feels weird to me. Ayu's come in to form as one of the 10s, but Ayu is supposed to be playing on the right-hand side. Now, if he is one of the 10s, that's fine, but then he's come too far across. Like, that means that the other side of the pitch is completely vacant, which means if we lose the ball on transition, the opposition can switch the ball to the other side, and they got a man in already. Kanoos, we've talked about it already in the show. He's drifted far too much to the left-hand side, and I think he'd be getting in the way of Mavididi. And that means that Mavididi, well, this is probably position is okay for him. He is hugging the touchline, but I would like to see him a bit further up. So this just all looks like a bit of a mess to me. And I feel that, like, if this is the way that we're playing, what it means is we're not really able to find the right passes at the right time. Like, to be fair, this move does go into something. We play into Ayu. So what happens? We play the ball into Ayu and he receives the ball. But what I've marked here in a big cross is because he's the one that's come over, right? This is where you want to play the pass, but there's no one here. right? It could potentially be JJ, but look, we've only got 3 men going forward. Now, if this was last season under Enzo, when we attacked, we always had 5 men going forward. And that's why we were so, so deadly. And it also meant that players didn't even really need to think about things. They knew where people should go. So, in my opinion, the player on the ball actually should be Bilal El Khanous because he's the left-sided 10. And in this position, we should be seeing Ayew. And then maybe even further out to the other side, there should be another player supporting the attack, which would be Fatawu or Justin, how we want to do the system. And you'd have Vardy up top. And that's how we were really effective last year. So in this case, even though we have, to be fair, managed to play out and got the ball, and we've got it here, in this case, it's a 2 against 4, or let's say it's Jamie Vardy's got 3 men on him. What's the likelihood of you scoring in this case? You're not going to score. And that's why we're struggling to really make much in the attacking phase of the game, because we're attacking with 1 man less this season. We're attacking with only 4 at maximum instead of 5 like we did last season. And it means we're not as threatening. I do briefly now want to talk about Steffi Mavadidi, who is man of the match. Going to have some more clips of him later on, but Super Steffi was tremendous today. Here we've got an example of him picking up the ball, and he's got 3 men around him. They obviously know that he's a danger man. For once, Khanous is standing in a good position. But even though he's got 3 men around him, he pulls up a little step over and he goes for the cross, and it ends up going for a corner. And Mavadidi, all throughout the game, was brilliant, right? I know that he was like up against Ashley Young, so he probably was licking his lips, but it wasn't just him. He was really courageous on the ball. He was trying step overs even in wet conditions. He was holding up the ball. He was passing it through. He was linking up play well with his teammates. He was not being overly selfish, which he has done in the past. Actually, it's been refreshing to see that after him being dropped for the first couple of games of the season, since he's come in, he's probably been our best player since coming in. I think overall Ndidi's still our best player, but that's because he's played in all the games. But I think Mavadidi, since he's been returned to the starting lineup, is the quality, and he scored again today, which is 2 goals in 2 games for him, and long may it continue. Speaking of Ndidi, before the game, I said that I thought Ndidi versus Idrissa Gueye could be a key battle to watch out for. But a little flaw in my plans is because Idrissa Gueye wasn't playing because he had the bereavement, so he wasn't in there. But speaking of Ndidi, I still think overall Ndidi had a good game. Now, I'm sure a lot of people in the comments will be saying, what are you talking about? Offensively, he made some big blunders. I wouldn't say necessarily blunders, but he definitely lacked a bit in quality there. But I still think overall he was good, and he was getting into the right spaces, and he did get close on occasion. So here we've got a transition moment, and we can see that because JJ's pushed up, he's the man that's out of position, so he's running back. So Ndidi's here, and he's going to have to watch out. And this is Ndiaye, who could get the ball, of course, who's just scored, and is a real danger man for him. But in the end, it's Ndidi that gets back. He wins the ball, and not only does he win the ball cleanly, but he gets us on our way and gets us attacking. And this was really good play from him. Later on in the game, Ndidi did something outrageous. I'm going to link it in the clips before. You've got to see this backheel pass. It was great. But Ndidi receives the ball under pressure. He turns. He plays the ball out. The ball advances forward and he gets the ball here. And even though look at where he is, he's got his back to goal. He's looking at the players, but he knows that JJ is going to make the run in behind. So what he does is audacious. Look at that. He's going to go for the back heel blind and he's going to play it there. And he pulls it off. It comes to JJ and JJ plays the cross. And this, I think, is a bit unlucky. Just a minute before, Vardy went down with what we thought could be a very serious injury, but in the end, he shook it off. But I think if Vardy hadn't got injured, I think he might have put this in the back of the net or at least test the keeper. So that was unlucky. But that shows you that Ndidi, for his supposed lack of technical quality, he's not as bad as people think. I think he's actually decent, if not good. I wouldn't say great, but if I'm being honest, I think of all the people that played in attacking positions today in that central attacking midfield position, so that's him, Bonanate and El Khanous, he was the best by quite some distance. Have to speak about this. It was a crazy day at the King Power today. 4 seasons in 1 match. You might notice as I'm going through the graphics that it started nice and warm like a summer's day. And then it started hailing and snowing and it was crazy. And at one point in time, players were trying to pass the ball across the pitch and it was literally getting stuck in the water, which is insane to see that in a Premier League game. And in fact, what ended up happening is the match got delayed at half time to wait before it could start. And you know what? As soon as it started, it just rained even harder anyway. So that was kind of a crazy situation. But look at this picture. Look how heavy it was coming down. And this on the camera. So for all of you that are at the game, fair play to you. I respect you because at this point in time, we're 1 down. We were playing rubbish, if I'm being honest, overall. And you're getting absolutely drenched. and you don't get to change at half time into a new kit. So poor you. You have my respect, King Power Faithful. Right. What was the story of the first half? Lack of threat. We just didn't really look like scoring. Something that I want to bring up here. So we've got Christensen. So, you probably know my thoughts on this already, but he's been introduced to the team and I just don't really see what he's giving the team. I think he made 2 crosses in the entire game. This one was kind of okay, but I just feel that like he has a lot of effort, but he shows more in terms of effort than what he actually does on the ball. And I think he makes the team worse. He doesn't make it better. I'm not saying he's necessarily a bad player, but we've got to do what's best for the team. And for him to be out, so him to be in and Ricardo to be out, and in this case, look, in today's game, Ricardo and Fatawu didn't start. Does that sound crazy to you? It sounds crazy to me if you're speaking about what you think the best Leicester City lineup is. Anyway, talking about a lack of threat, he goes for a cross here. It's actually not the worst. It ends up coming out to Ayew. Ayew can't quite sort of head it in, so he tries to play it back to Ndidi. And this is where fair play. This is not Ndidi's finest moment. I don't know what this is. It's supposed to be a cross or a shot. Whatever it is, it's got more likelihood of going outside of the stadium than it did of ever hitting the net or finding another player. So that was poor. And speaking of, again, thanks to LCFC data, this is a chart of rolling XG versus XG against. Now, this is a little bit kind of unfair because, once the season starts and you start on a negative spiral, probably the gap is going to get bigger. But really what this is showing is that overall this season, the amount of goals that we're expected to score isn't that much. We've only supposed to have scored 4. I think we've actually scored 5 or 6 in total. So that's decent, right? But the issue is this is how many goals we should have conceded. And there is a big gap between the two. And fundamentally, with this underlying data, not everyone believes in it, but it's very rare over the course of a season that data doesn't catch up with you. And in fact, in the season that we went down, alarm bells should have been ringing because in the season before, our stats looked similar to this. And so even though we finished 9th, most people probably thought, well, okay, they had a bit of an off season, but there's no chance that Leicester would go down. And instead, we absolutely shit the bed and we did get relegated, right? And so this is the issue here, right? We didn't maybe have the best starting fixtures, but we definitely didn't have the worst, right? We didn't play Man City. We didn't play Arsenal. They're coming next. We didn't play Liverpool. So I think every game there was the opportunity to get some points. We've only got 3 points. And in every single game we've played so far, we've had less XG than the opposition. And that is not a good look. If that continues, it's only going to be one result, and that is relegation come the end of the season. So that's a scary place to be. Right, let's move on to the second half. This is becoming a familiar graphic that I show every single game, and it's frustrating. Late to make changes. In this game, to be fair, Steve Cooper was the first manager to make changes, but he didn't make a single change at halftime, and that was outrageous. Because at this point in time, El Canoes, like I said, it felt like we were playing with 10 men rather than 11. He was having a total off day. With that weather, he's probably having a miserable time. And I think he should have been pulled off at halftime to make a statement. This is a game that we needed to win. At least we got a point from it. But who knows? If we'd have made the change earlier, maybe we would have won. So he does make the change and he makes it at 55 minutes. I suppose giving the team 10 more minutes to improve is okay. But as the momentum graph showed, nothing was changing. So we had to make the change. And on come Facundo Buonanotte makes me laugh. Look at this. He's just come off the bench and he's already trenched before he even steps foot onto the field. Crazy. So he comes onto the pitch and actually this changed the game for a huge positive. And the biggest difference is even though Buonanotte himself didn't actually do anything crazy, like he didn't get an assist, he didn't score, he did make some key passes. But the difference was that all of a sudden, the shape of the team was correct. So he was used to playing in the positions. So here you can see that he is standing in the number 10 position in central midfield. And here we've got the gaps between the other players. So yeah, we've got our wingers in the right position. This is Mavadi. We've got Vardy here. We've got Ndidi now pushing up here. Ayew's coming central. So this is good spaces between all the players. And look just how much more balanced we look on the attack. We also get improved progression. So now many of the players are working well with one another. So Ndidi, who's now in pushing right up, by the way, I think this was also part of the change. He was now working more of a box crusher rather than sitting so deep. It was notable for me, actually, how the more aggressive Ndidi became, the better the team played. But essentially, I think that Buonanotte and Ndidi together, that pairing worked. And we started looking way more threatening. And that's actually what I wanted to see at the start of the match. And I think that is what we need to do. Maybe not necessarily against Arsenal, but in the next game, I think, which is Bournemouth afterwards, I think that's how we've got to play. Those two have got to play together. And I think that's how we get the best out of the team. Those two pushing up, they stand in the right spaces. They're good at making the rest of the team connect. And we look so much better as a result of it. Another result of this improved progression is we now started to make more spaces and finding plays. So I mentioned in the first half how fast of his diagonal passing is a threat. And in this example, because the way that we've compressed the game to one side, look at Ndidi in a good 10 position, Buonanotte in the 10 position, wingers in the right places. So Fast can go for a diagonal across. And what he does, here's the ball in the air, and look at Mavididi. And this, again, is the best stuff from last season. So last season, what we would do is we'd have to be patient, but we'd shift the ball from side to side. And what we were trying to do is get either Mavididi or Fatawu one-on-one against the fullback, because we were relying on them having better skill to beat that player. And if they beat them, then all of a sudden their team was wide open and we could pick out a cut back or a cross or take a cut in and shoot. We could make opportunities that way. So here the ball comes to Mavididi. Mavididi managed to bring it in, beats his men a few times. Again, he was really starting to step on it at this point in time. Kanouse was no longer getting his way right. Now he had the free reign of the king power. He plays it into Ndidi. And this is a bit unfortunate. I actually think in this example, Ndidi should have shot. The weather was still absolutely bucketing it down. And I think that shots on target had a good chance to go in. But instead, he decided to go for this cute reverse pass. And I think if he'd have pulled it off, it would have been a great chance for Vardy. But unfortunately, he overcooked it and it goes out of play. And people were getting frustrated. I think that's fair, but I would say that the weather was atrocious. And so you might have to change the weighting of the pass. And I still think that overall, as I say, he's actually improving. He's getting the team forward. He actually was involved in the goal that we scored again. So he keeps doing that. And he was helping us out. But the change was, look at where Buonanotte is. He's standing where we want him. I was saying how El Kanouse was not getting involved enough in the first half. He wasn't box crashing. Buonanotte is where you want him. If the ball comes for a rebound, he could tuck it in. And that's what we want to see from him. Already mentioned that he was man of the match, but let's talk some more about Super Steffi. So Super Steffi ends up scoring off a corner. Ball gets played in by wings. This is Ndidi who jumps, and he actually, I'm not sure he quite wins the ball. I don't know if he got the assist or not. I think it was from him, because ultimately off this duel, it comes down, it bounces down, it goes to Mavididi. Second game in a row. Now with his right foot, volleys it, and boom, it's in, and it's 1-1. And that was great. So we managed to get back into it, and now all of a sudden the momentum is ours. And could we go on and win the game? Because at this point in time, 73 minutes, you know you're going to have, 20 minutes left to play. You've got a great opportunity, and a manager could really go for it. And Everton was clearly starting to tire, and they were starting to really regress back into their box. And unfortunately, we just didn't really take advantage of it, and there was a lack of threat. And this is frustrating. And this is why, for me, look, given how poor we were at half time, I think having a point is not the end of the world. But come the end of the season, this could be the result that puts us down. And we had the opportunity to win it. And I just felt it was not brave enough to go for it, which is a surprise, because against Villa, we really threw everything including the kitchen sink at Aston Villa. So here you can see at the game, in the end, we've only made 3 subs, right? And of those subs, the next one to be made was in the 83rd minute for Vardy, who was clearly tired before this. He should have come off at 70 at latest. And we put Fatawu on. And that was a good sub to make, but we made it in the 90th minute and we took off Steffi Mavididi, which is insane, absolutely insane. Why did Ayew stay on the pitch? Going to say it again, nothing wrong with Ayew, but for this game, he wasn't the one. We had one winger who was rinsing the fullback. Imagine if we had 2, and we have 2 great wingers in the team. Why are we not playing them? Cooper, listen to me. Put them both on. We will win games. What are you doing, lad? Everton, they didn't really have that much on the bench to make changes, but I was surprised that they didn't make too many changes either. And I think one thing I will say about them, and maybe both these managers, is maybe one of the reasons, but both these managers are struggling, is that they don't make enough subs and they're not adventurous enough. Because again, looking at them, they did like-for-like subs, Lindstrom for Harrison, and then he's actually made a defensive sub himself just to cling on to the 1-1, which says it all really. And they've taken off NDI, who is their best player, in my opinion, and they've put in Irabignum to try and see out the game. And look, fair play, they got it. But I actually think, again, these changes, if they were made 20 minutes early, I think a good manager, after we get back into it, maybe even makes the changes right there and then, step on the gas even more, take care of the momentum. We saw in the last game, Palace, they made a really brave sub. They took off one of their centre-backs and they put on another attacking midfield, and they put 2 men up front. And not only did they get the goal back, right, but they even maybe could have won it because they even had time to get it. But we didn't have a manager like Glasner. So in the end, it finishes 1-1. I'll put some more links and stuff to see more of our attacking play, but I think you're getting the general gist of it. Some of the clips of Mavididi are definitely worth watching. He was a delight to watch. I love seeing a tricky winger. Wish I could play that way myself, but I can't. But it ends 1-1. I want to give a quick shout out to some players that I felt were good performers. So Ndidi, a lot of people didn't, like his threatening attacking third, but look at these stats again. They're crazy, right? He's successful dribbles, ground duels, aerial duels. He had shots on target. He made interceptions. He made tackles. When Ndidi plays well, the team plays better. And crucially, I think the further upfield Ndidi goes, the better we look. And that's, for me, the key difference. I don't think he was bad playing next to wings. But we took Skip out of the team. But for me, I would keep Ndidi as one of the box crushers, in my opinion. I think in the transitional nature of football in the Premier League, he's actually well suited to it. And that's a crazy series of events to go that way, but I think it's true. Mads was superb. I didn't show this clip, but Everton did have a one-on-one on transition in the second half. And Calvert-Lewin, who I called out as the danger man, I thought he was going to score, but Mads made a really good save and palmed it away. So he was very good. I wouldn't go as far as saying he was man of the match, or if it wasn't for him, we would have lost, although I could just sort of see that argument. But I think he was good. And I will say, though, that I think it's going totally under the radar that this is a guy that had played 0 minutes of Premier League football prior to this season, and he's been good in every single game and hasn't made a blunder yet. I'm sure he will make 1 or 2 blunders, as he did last year in the Championship. But when I look at some of the other keepers that have been signed over the years, like Onana, or last season, do you remember Burnley? They had James Trafford and he was just making mistake after mistake. Mads has settled brilliantly. It's crazy that he's not the Danish number one. Maybe that's good for us because at the minute he goes under the radar. But this is almost certainly going to be the next big sale from the club because he's a top player. And finally, the man of the match that I would pick easily, Steffi Mavididi. Everything about him was brilliant. He improved in the second half, and I don't think it's his fault. I think when the space ahead of him was free, that's when he was even better. And as I'm saying, we've got 2 good wingers and we're not using them as well as we could do. Imagine if we use both of them at the same time. That's how we'd really get the best out of our team. That's how we did it last year. And I think, to be fair to Mavididi, he was quite inconsistent in the Championship and he wasn't even in the starting lineup this season. But since he's come in, he's looked great and he looks like he can play in the Premier League. This is now against Palace and Everton, and sure, they might be in the bottom 10, those teams, right? But he's still showing he can play at least that level. I'm sure he will struggle against teams that are doing a bit better than that. But we need to focus on the teams in that area and get points from them. Time for some closing thoughts. Overall, I think it was a good to get a point from a losing position, but for me, this is easily 2 points thrown away. Cooper is too pragmatic and he's safety first. He could have started the game more offensively. He could be, way less risk averse. Some managers, they would have made that El Canu sub after half an hour. Now, that I think is a bit too much because you're going to destroy a player's confidence. But I'm just saying some players will do it, or managers. I've seen Bielsa do that in the past. And afterwards, he's even said, oh, nothing to do with the players, my fault. My fault as the manager. I shouldn't have picked him, not because of the player, because it was a tactical mistake and it's nothing to do with him and it's my fault. That's what a strong manager could do. And then you can even help your player and you can even tell them and explain to them why you as the manager made the mistake and what you're going to do to fix it. Even if it's not strictly true, you can do that, right? But for whatever it's worth, right, I think him starting as a creative player, it was good to see that, because if he'd have started the same 3 CDMs or the same lineup as last week, in this game, that would have been a mistake. But I will say that actually, even though Bilal El Khanous had a bad game, and actually overall that Jordan Ayew had a good game, actually it was Ayew that shouldn't have started. Because if ever there was a game, as I say, that we needed someone to run at a fullback or someone to be able to play the clever pass, this was the game. So it should have been Fatawu or Bonanote. Not neither, which is what it was. Mental. He was too slow to sub, not enough subs overall. Again, he could have put more of those players on. Edouard came on, but what did he really do? Didn't have enough time to change the game. Give him some time to change the game. And what I think is that overall, all the best aspects of our play are actually the ones from last season, and they're not additions from this. Sorry, I have to say this. I think everything that Cooper's tried to add to the team has made the team worse. Whereas I think all the things that are kind of muscle memory from last season, that's when we look good as a team, Leicester. Want to show the table? So actually, despite the fact that we drew, in the end, is exactly as you were. What ended up happening is that Ipswich and Southampton also played one another, and Ipswich grabbed an equaliser in the 95th minute. So I see they still got that like about them as they did last season. And Palace drew 0-0 with Man United, and they should have won, but they didn't. So what that means is that everyone stays in the same place. Actually, the big losers, really, I would say, are Wolves, which is a big surprise. They only have a point, and they're bottom of the league right now. Everton actually climb above them, although they've got equal goal difference. And that is an interesting one because actually, I think a lot of people are saying that they think Wolves will be the first team to sack their manager. Does that mean we should sack our manager? Well, I think people should be given time. But what you have to say is that the longer you leave it, the less people are available out there that you can get. Would Graham Potter go to Wolves? Not sure. But remember the season that we went down? That season, Villa, they sacked Gerrard and they bought in Unai Emery, and now they're in the Champions League. Crazy. Talking about the next 5 games. Sorry, not the next 5 games, but I wanted to bring this up. So a few games ago, we had a look at what our next 5 games were. This is actually when we returned from the international break. And what we said is that in this run of games, we needed to get our first win at minimum, if not multiple wins, and start picking up points. But Palace, well, look, we've only got 2 points out of 6 so far, and we played Palace and Everton. It's not enough. We should at minimum have 4 here. We've got Arsenal next. I mean, you never know. Maybe you can get something, but you don't expect to get anything from there. Our record at the Emirates is awful. And then you've got Bournemouth, and then you've got Southampton. And I believe that after that game, there will be another international break. I think this could determine Cooper's future, if I'm being honest, because if we still haven't won at the end of this, I think you've got to make a change because you just can't afford to get caught adrift. And it's already a big opportunity. We could have opened up a 5-point gap on Everton today. Instead, it's only 2. I also want to just give you some pure facts, right? We've only got 3 points from 5 games. We have a worse XG than our opponents in every game that we've played. Cooper has only won 2 away games in the Premier League in his entire career, which is poor. Doesn't bode well if you're not picking up enough points at home. And so far, we've only got 2 points out of 9 at home. Ricardo Pereira has not had a single minute of Premier League football this season. Do you think that's crazy? Because I think that's crazy. I think it's bonkers. And he hasn't started Mavididi and Fatawu together yet. All those are facts. Where am I going with this? You can make your own conclusions. But would any Leicester fan do any of that above? Well, it might have worse XG than your opponents in every other game, to be honest. But the other ones, not so sure. Right. I always think, though, in life, if you're going to complain, you should try and offer some constructive criticism. So that's what I'm going to try and do here. How should we fix things? And what I want to say is okay, even though I've been complaining a lot here, there are actually still some things we do that are good. And what are those things? I think actually as a team, we're good at winning 50-50s. We tend to win more challenges than the opposition in every game that we've played, even if we lose. That's actually quite good. That means our team is putting in effort and they're capable of winning duels to get you going. We are also good on the transition offensively. We've scored multiple goals that way, and we look like carrying a threat like that, which is good. We always have wingers that can cause damage one-on-one. Mavididi for sure, but even Fatawu earlier in the season, I mean, he crossed for Vardy to score in the very first game. And that was against Spurs. So we do have good wingers there. And we have good box crashers who can attack and defend. And specifically, that's Buonanotte and Ndidi. Buonanotte has scored and was unlucky not to assist Vardy in the first game. And Ndidi's got 3 assists. He might even have 4 at the end of the day, depending on who they give the assist to. And they're good at going box to box. They can attack and defend. Buonanotte has been impressive in the way he's been tenacious to win the ball back and cause disruption. And that's a strength that we could use. So if you take all that into account, what should we do? And this is what we should do. We should go back to the system we used last year because it worked, right? You could change the personnel around a little bit and you could make your own version of this. But essentially what I'm saying is when we're building up, you use the 3-2-2-3 shape. But rather than having an inverted fullback, you could have skip and wings. One of these players can still drift out to become a fullback in a defensive phase if you want to defend that way, which is probably what I would do, but you don't have to. Here you've got the box 4. So I'm saying play Ndidi and Buonanotte as the box crashers, as we did last season. And the big difference is that you put both the wingers on. And it means that when you attack with 5. So you still have 5 back to defend and you have 5 to attack with. And I think this will make our attack a lot more potent. and it will mean that both the wingers can cause trouble on both sides. And really, why we were so good last year is that those wingers were so good that they attracted players to them, and that meant there was more space for both of the box crashers, Kieran Dewsbury Hall and Wilfred Ndidi, to attack in, which is why they were effective. So this change will make the whole team work better. And in fact, in this game, we basically saw that as Ndidi kept pushing up and essentially becoming another box crasher, we were better. So why not just do that from the start? That is what Enzo Maresca did, and it worked. Yeah, maybe we don't do this against Arsenal, to be fair, right? But Bournemouth, I would go back to this way. Now, I don't think Steve Cooper is going to go that way. I think he's going to want to keep to his system. And his system might not even be as bad as I'm making it out to be. But if we are going to go his system, then I think we need to do this and make these changes. And so what I've done here is that Fatal is out of the team. That might be controversial, but I've put Ricky P back in. Instead of Christensen, I've gone for Justin. And what we're basically saying in this system is that when we would attack, Ricky P would be making the auxiliary winger. So he would be the right-sided winger. Buonanotte would then essentially be the box crasher, as would Ndidi, and Mavididi would be able to hug the touchline on the other side and be one-on-one, and there'd be no one getting in his way. Bilal, he can play his way into the team when he improves and learns the system. I think for right here, right now, this would be the best way that we could get the most out of us using our existing system. And it means free Ricky P. He needs to come back into the team. And Justin, he doesn't need to get forward as much. You could say that that means that your left fullback can't cross the ball as much. That's true. But honestly, we haven't really scored off a Christensen cross yet. And I don't think we look likely to, right? I think he's an okay player, but he's not as good going forwards as someone like a Luca Digne or an Andy Robertson or someone like that, right? It's just he's more of a defensive-minded fullback, in my opinion. Doesn't mean you're a bad player. It's just how it is. And Gary Neville, if you want to call it. They have horses for courses, and he isn't the one to be attacking. And to leave out a player as skilled as Ricardo Pereira is crazy. So that's it. This has been a fairly long one. I'll put some more clips in down below. Please let me know what you think. We're going to have a midweek game in the Carabao Cup against Walsall. I won't really cover that one. If it was Premier League, I would do, but it takes quite a long time to do these analyses. But we'll be back next week for Arsenal. Not expecting a fun day at the office for that one, but let's look at them. Let's see how we'll do. That'll be our first experience of playing one of the top guns in the league. As always, thank you so much for watching the channel. If you don't already, please subscribe, like, reshare, and also comment below. So let me know what you think. Do you think I'm being harsh on Cooper? Do you think I'm actually being a bit too lenient? Are you Cooper out already? Do you think it's time to give him some more opportunity to see what he can do? You let me know, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, and goodbye.